Today, special counsel Jack Smith is expected to submit evidence in the criminal election interference case against former President Donald Trump.
Smith and prosecutors have until 5 p.m. Eastern time to file the extensive dossier to the federal judge. It may contain new evidence connected to Donald Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
Now, you may remember Smith recently submitted a revised indictment after the Supreme Court ruled Trump cannot be prosecuted for official acts in office. Trump has pleaded not guilty. Him and his lawyers have sought to get the case dismissed and oppose any efforts to release evidence.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane has been closely following all of this. He is on Capitol Hill for us. So, Scott, talk to us about what sort of evidence Smith is expected to be submitting. Will any of this become public for us?
Well, we know some of that, but there are still some mysteries that abound between now and 5 p.m. on the East Coast. It's going to be 180 pages or so. It's an awful lot to be filing in a federal court system. It's going to include some arguments from Jack Smith as to how he's going to proceed with this case. Despite the Supreme Court's determination, Donald Trump enjoys some presidential immunity. Those 180 pages have the prospect of raising new evidence we haven't seen yet, new details of what happened between November 3rd, 2020 and January 6, 2021 that we haven't heard about yet. But how much we get to see? Well, that's the mystery right now. It's quite possible Jack Smith files this with the court system.
All right, so let me ask you something. What happens when a prosecutor says he had enough evidence to convict a sitting president but couldn't do it because of a Supreme Court ruling and an election result? Yeah. That's where we are right now. Jack Smith, the guy who's been chasing Trump for years, just dropped a bomb that's got everyone talking. And honestly, it's wild. Here's the deal. Jack Smith released this massive report, like 137 pages of pure legal firepower. And in it, he doesn't hold back. He says straight up that Donald Trump would have been convicted at trial. Not maybe, not probably, would have been. The only reason it didn't happen, the Supreme Court decided presidents get this crazy broad immunity, and then Trump won the election. So the case just disappeared. Can you believe this? We're talking about criminal conspiracies here, election interference, mishandling classified documents, the whole 9 yards, and Smith sitting there saying, yeah, we had him. We had the evidence, we had the witnesses, we were ready to go. But then the rules changed, the goalposts moved, and now Trump's back in the White House, untouchable. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Well, that's the mystery right now. It's quite possible Jack Smith files this with the court system under seal, which means only for the judge and the other party to see, not for the public to see. It's possible Jack Smith puts some of it before the public and some of it under seal. It's also possible the judge in this case, Judge Tanya Chutkan, decides to quite quickly open it up, unseal it to be seen. It's also possible Donald Trump and his legal team challenge that. So we're going to get something today. It's front facing. It's an open question as the afternoon began here in Washington.
So I understand, Scott, because of that, you're limited on specifics. We mentioned the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court. How is it connected to today's filing? Because when you look at the case in Florida with classified documents, we saw...
Now, if you're a Trump supporter, you're probably thinking this is just another witch hunt, another desperate attempt by the left to take down their guy. And look, I get it. Trump's been saying for years that he's the victim of political persecution, that the deep state is out to get him, that people like Jack Smith are just partisan hacks with an agenda. And honestly, Trump fired back hard on this one. He went on Truth Social and called Smith a clueless prosecutor who couldn't even get the case to trial before the election, which Trump won overwhelmingly, according to Trump. But here's the thing. Smith isn't just some random prosecutor throwing accusations around. This guy built his career on taking down war criminals and corrupt politicians. He doesn't play games. And when he says he had enough evidence to secure a conviction, that's not a light statement. That's a prosecutor saying, I was ready to prove this in court, beyond a reasonable doubt. So what does this all mean? Well, it means we're right back in the middle of the biggest legal and political controversy of our time, presidential immunity. Can a president really do whatever they want while in office and just get away with it? Is Trump actually above the law? Or is this whole thing just a political circus designed to keep us divided and distracted? And here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about Trump anymore. Yeah, Trump's the guy at the center of it all. But what Smith is really challenging here is this idea that winning an election or getting a favorable Supreme Court ruling can just erase accountability. Like, think about that for a second. If you can commit crimes or allegedly commit crimes and then just win your way out of consequences, what does that say about our system? Smith's report is basically a middle finger to that whole concept. He's saying, no, the evidence was there, the case was solid, and the only reason we're not having this conversation in a courtroom is because the rules protected him, and that's what's driving people crazy right now. Because depending on where you stand politically, you either see this as proof that Trump got away with something serious, or you see it as proof that the system was rigged against him from the start. The timing here is insane too. Trump just got back into office. He's already making moves, picking his team, setting his agenda, and now here comes Jack Smith dropping this report like a grenade into the conversation. It's like Smith waited until the absolute perfect moment to remind everyone, hey, don't forget, we're not done talking about this. And the media's eating it up, obviously, because this is the kind of story that gets clicks, gets views, gets people arguing in the comments. It's got everything. A disgraced prosecutor or a hero standing up for justice, depending on who you ask. A president who's either a criminal mastermind or a victim of the deep state in a Supreme Court decision that's either protecting our institutions or destroying them. So what's really going on here? Is Jack Smith right? Did Trump actually commit crimes that would have landed anyone else in prison? Or is this just the final gasp of a failed prosecution that never had a real case to begin with? And more importantly, why does this matter now? Why should you care about a case that's technically over? Because here's the truth. This case might be over in the legal sense, but politically, it's just getting started. This report is fuel for the fire. It's ammunition for Trump's enemies. It's a rallying cry for people who think the system let them down. And it's a reminder that no matter how many elections Trump wins, no matter how many judges rule in his favor, there are still people out there who believe he belongs in prison. And that divide, that massive chasm between the people who see Trump as a criminal and the people who see him as a victim, that's not going anywhere. If anything, this report just made it wider. Stick with me, because we're about to break this whole thing down. And trust me, it's way crazier than you think. Okay, so let's get into what Jack Smith actually said, because the headlines are one thing, but the details, that's where this gets really messy. Smith's report is focused on two main things. First, the classified documents case. You know, the whole Mar-a-Lago raid situation, boxes of sensitive national security documents just sitting around Trump's resort. Second, the January 6th stuff, the election interference, the attempts to overturn the 2020 results. Smith's been investigating both of these for years now, and this report is basically his final word on it all. Now here's what Smith says happened. According to him, his team gathered enough evidence to prove that Trump knowingly committed criminal conspiracies, not just bad judgment, not just pushing legal boundaries, actual crimes. He says they had witnesses ready to testify, documents ready to present, a whole case built and ready to go to trial. And in Smith's view, a jury would have convicted Trump, no question. But then the Supreme Court stepped in. Over the summer, the court issued this ruling on presidential immunity, and it was broad, like really broad. Basically, the court said that presidents have immunity for official acts, which sounds reasonable on the surface, right? Like, you don't want presidents getting sued every time they make a tough decision. But the problem is what counts as an official act. That's where it gets murky. Smith argues that Trump's lawyers used this ruling to shield him from prosecution. They said, hey, everything Trump did was part of his official duties as president, so he's immune. You can't charge him. And the courts, well, they didn't shut that argument down fast enough, so the case stalled. And then Trump won the election. And once he's president again, DOJ policy says you can't indict a sitting president, so game over. Smith is furious about this. You can tell from the way the report is written. He's not mincing words. He basically says the Supreme Court's decision creates a dangerous precedent, that it could protect powerful officials from accountability, that it undermines the rule of law. He even says, and this is basically what he's arguing, that the ruling could amount to a precedent for protecting powerful officials. But then he adds that he would adhere to the law as the Supreme Court articulated it, which is Smith's way of saying, I think this is wrong, but I'm not going to break the rules. Now let's talk about Trump's response. Because of course Trump responded, the guy can't help himself. He went on Truth Social and absolutely unloaded on Smith, called him clueless, said he failed to get the case to trial before the election, reminded everyone that he won the election overwhelmingly, and framed the whole thing as just another example of the deep state trying to take him down. And look, Trump's got a point here. If Smith really had such a solid case, why didn't he move faster? The investigations dragged on for years. There were delays, legal battles, procedural nonsense, and by the time Smith was ready to actually go to trial, it was too late. Trump was already running for president again, and then he won. So you could argue that Smith just ran out of time, but Smith would say that's not his fault. He'd say the delays were caused by Trump's legal team fighting every single step of the way, filing motions, challenging subpoenas, dragging things out on purpose. And then, right when it looked like the case might actually get to a courtroom, the Supreme Court drops this immunity bombshell. So from Smith's perspective, he did everything right. The system just failed. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. This whole fight is not really about Trump anymore. I mean, yeah, Trump's the guy at the center. But what this is really about is power, presidential power, and the question of whether anyone, even the president, is truly accountable under the law. Think about it. If Trump can allegedly commit crimes and then just win an election and make it all go away, what does that mean for future presidents? Does it mean they can do whatever they want as long as they stay in office? Does it mean the only way to hold a president accountable is through impeachment, which we all know is a political circus that never actually works? Smith's report is basically arguing that we're setting a terrible precedent here, that we're creating a system where the most powerful person in the country is effectively above the law, and that should scare you no matter what side you're on. Because what happens when it's a president you don't like? What happens when it's someone doing things you find genuinely dangerous or corrupt? Do you really want them to have that kind of immunity? But then there's the other side of this. The people who look at Smith's report and see something totally different, they see a prosecutor who's still bitter about losing, a guy who spent years trying to take down Trump, failed, and now he's writing this report to save face, to make it look like he would have won if only the rules hadn't changed. It's the ultimate excuse, right? Oh, we totally had him, but the Supreme Court ruined everything. And there's some truth to that criticism, because Smith could have moved faster. He could have prioritized getting to trial sooner. He could have made different strategic decisions, but he didn't. And now Trump's president again, and Smith's out of a job, and all we have is this report saying, what if? The timing of this release is suspicious too. Why now? Why drop this report right as Trump's getting settled back into office? Is it really just about transparency and the public's right to know? Or is it a political move designed to undermine Trump's legitimacy from day one? Because let's be real, that's what this does. It puts a cloud over Trump's second term before it even really starts. It keeps the controversy alive. It gives Democrats and Trump critics something to point to and say, see, he's a criminal. He just got away with it. And the media is running with it. Of course they are, because this is red meat for both sides. If you hate Trump, this report confirms everything you already believed, that he's corrupt, that he's above the law, that the system is broken because it let him escape justice. If you love Trump, this report confirms everything you already believed, that the deep state is out to get him, that prosecutors like Smith are partisan hacks, that Trump's a victim of political persecution. Nobody's changing their mind here. That's the thing. This report isn't convincing anyone of anything they didn't already think. It's just giving people more ammunition for the fights they were already having. But here's what we can't ignore, the substance of Smith's claims. Because even if you think Smith's a partisan hack, even if you think this is all political theater, the questions he's raising are real. Did Trump commit crimes? Would a jury have convicted him? And if the answer is yes, what does it mean that he's now president again? Those are serious questions, and they don't go away just because Trump won an election. In fact, they become more important because now we're talking about a president who might be using the power of his office to avoid accountability for things he did before. That's not a small deal. That's a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. And you know what else is crazy? The sheer amount of evidence Smith claims to have. We're not talking about a thin case here. According to Smith, they had multiple witnesses. They had documents. They had testimony from people inside Trump's own circle. This wasn't built on speculation or hearsay. This was, according to Smith, a rock-solid prosecution ready to go. But we'll never know if that's true because we'll never see it tested in court. And that's what makes this so frustrating for everyone involved. Trump's critics feel robbed of justice. Trump's supporters feel vindicated that the case never went anywhere. And the rest of us are just left wondering what actually happened. All right, so let's break this down into the key points you need to understand because this whole situation is complicated, but it really comes down to a few big ideas. Point 1. Jack Smith says he had the evidence to convict Trump. He's not saying he thinks Trump's guilty. He's saying he could prove it in court. That's a huge distinction. Prosecutors don't usually make claims like that unless they're really confident. So when Smith says he gathered sufficient evidence to secure a conviction, he's putting his reputation on the line. He's saying, I'm not just guessing here. I had the case. Now, does that mean Trump's guilty? Not legally, because he was never convicted. He was never even charged in a way that stuck. But it does mean that a very experienced prosecutor looked at all the evidence, talked to all the witnesses, reviewed all the documents, and concluded that Trump committed crimes. That's not nothing. And think about what Smith's claiming here. He's saying Trump was involved in multiple criminal conspiracies. That's plural, multiple. We're talking about a coordinated effort to interfere with the election, to overturn legitimate results, to mishandle classified information in ways that could have endangered national security. These aren't small accusations. These are the kind of charges that would destroy anyone else's life. But Trump's sitting in the Oval Office right now. He's making policy decisions. He's appointing judges. He's running the country, and Smith's sitting there writing reports about how he should have been convicted. The contrast is, it's absurd when you really think about it. Point 2. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling changed everything. This is the part that's really controversial, because before this ruling, there was at least a path to holding Trump accountable. You could charge him, you could take him to trial, you could let a jury decide, but after the Supreme Court said presidents have broad immunity for official acts, that path got a lot narrower, maybe impossible, and here's the scary part. We don't really know where the line is, what counts as an official act, what doesn't. The Supreme Court didn't give us clear answers. They just said presidents have immunity for official acts, figure out the rest yourselves. And that vagueness is dangerous, because it means future presidents could do all kinds of questionable things and then just claim it was part of their official duties. Smith's worried about this. He should be. We all should be. Because if the president is effectively immune from criminal prosecution, then the only check on presidential power is Congress through impeachment. And we all know how that works. It's political. It's partisan. It almost never results in actual removal from office. So what you end up with is a system where the president can do pretty much whatever they want, as long as their party controls enough of Congress to protect them. That's not how democracy is supposed to work, at least not according to the founders. They wanted checks and balances. They wanted accountability. They didn't want a king. But if the president can't be prosecuted if they're above the law, then what do we have? And let's be honest about something else. This ruling doesn't just protect Trump, it protects every future president, Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. If you're worried about Trump having this kind of immunity, you should also be worried about the next president having it too. Because once you set this precedent, once you establish that presidents are basically untouchable, you can't take it back. Point 3, Trump's victory makes all of this moot, at least for now, because here's the reality. Trump won the election. He's president, and DOJ policy says you can't indict a sitting president. So even if Smith wanted to keep pushing, even if he thought he could somehow overcome the immunity issues, it doesn't matter. Trump's untouchable for the next 4 years. And that's what makes this so frustrating for Trump's critics. Because in their view, justice was right there. The evidence was there. The case was there. But then Trump just won his way out of it. He didn't beat the charges in court. He didn't prove his innocence. He just became president again. And that made the whole thing go away. But from Trump's perspective, that's not what happened at all. From his perspective, the charges were bogus from the start. Smith never had a real case. And the only reason Smith's writing this report now is because he's bitter about losing. Trump would say he didn't win his way out of anything because there was nothing to win out of. It was all a hoax, a witch hunt, a political hit job. And you know what? A lot of people believe that. A lot of people voted for Trump specifically because they thought he was being unfairly targeted. They saw the investigations and the indictments and the legal drama, and they didn't see justice being served. They saw weaponization of the legal system against a political opponent, and that made them support Trump even more. So who's right? That's the question nobody can really answer, because we'll never know what a jury would have done. We'll never see the evidence tested in court. We'll never get that definitive moment where a verdict is read and we can say, okay, this is settled. Instead, we just have this report, Smith's version of events, his take on what would have happened if things had gone differently. And that's not enough. It's not enough to convince Trump supporters that he's guilty. And it's not enough to convince Trump's critics that the system worked. Point 4, it sets a dangerous precedent for the future. And this is really what keeps me up at night, because regardless of how you feel about Trump, regardless of whether you think Smith's right or wrong, we've now established that you can potentially avoid criminal prosecution by winning a presidential election. That's wild. That shouldn't be how it works. Think about what this means going forward. Any politician facing serious legal trouble can now look at Trump's playbook and think, okay, if I can just win the presidency, all my problems go away. That's not healthy for democracy. That's not the rule of law. That's just might makes right. Power protects power. And it's not just about criminal prosecution either. It's about accountability in general. Because if the president can't be held accountable through the courts and can't be held accountable through impeachment because it's too political, then how do we hold them accountable at all? Elections? Sure. But what if they win? What if the public doesn't care about the allegations? What if partisanship is so strong that people vote for their team no matter what? We're in uncharted territory here. And Smith's report is basically a warning sign. It's saying, hey, we just let something really significant happen, and we need to think about what it means. Here's another thing to consider. What happens when Trump's second term is over? Does all of this come back? Can prosecutors go after him again? Or does the statute of limitations run out? Does the evidence go stale? Do witnesses forget or disappear? Because that's the other consequence of these delays. Justice delayed is justice denied, as they say. And if Trump manages to run out the clock, then it really doesn't matter what evidence Smith had, it's over. And that might be exactly what Trump's strategy has been all along. Delay, 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 fight every subpoena, challenge every ruling, Drag things out until you can win an election and make it all go away. If that's the playbook, it worked perfectly. So where does this leave us? Well, nowhere good, honestly. Trump's president. Smith's report is out there, but it's not changing anything. The legal cases are done, the political battle continues, and we're all just stuck in the middle, trying to figure out what's true. Here's what I think. I think Smith probably did have a strong case. I think there was real evidence of wrongdoing, but I also think the system failed to move fast enough. And I think Trump exploited every legal advantage he had, which honestly, that's what defendants do. That's how the system works. But I also think we need to be really careful about where this goes next, because presidential immunity is now a much bigger shield than it used to be, and that should worry everyone, no matter what side you're on. The bottom line, Jack Smith's report isn't going to change anyone's mind about Trump. It's just going to give people more reasons to believe what they already believe. But it does raise real questions about accountability and power, and whether our system can actually hold presidents responsible when they do wrong. And those questions, yeah, they're not going away anytime soon. This is the new normal. This is what politics looks like now. A president who half the country thinks is a criminal and the other half thinks is a hero. And no amount of evidence or reports or investigations is going to bridge that gap. We're more divided than ever, and stories like this, they just make it worse. They don't resolve anything. They don't bring us together. They just give us more reasons to hate each other. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what we've become, a country where the truth doesn't matter as much as which side you're on, where evidence is just another weapon in a political war, where justice is whatever you can get away with. If that's where we are, then Smith's report is just another chapter in a story that never ends. Trump will keep claiming he's innocent. His critics will keep claiming he's guilty. And the rest of us will keep watching this circus, wondering if anything actually matters anymore. All right, that's it for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe Jack Smith? Or do you think this is all political theater? And more importantly, do you care? Because at this point, I'm not sure anyone does. Stay tuned because trust me, this story is far from over.